I'm not choosing Clara. I'm choosing Emma. The room went silent. Emma Calloway stood there in her dusty work clothes, dirt still under her fingernails from hauling firewood through the Montana snowstorm, watching her entire world explode. Her father's face turned purple. Her sister Clara, beautiful, perfect Clara, looked like she'd been slapped. And Cole Bennett, the wealthiest ranch heir in 3 counties, just chose the stable girl nobody wanted over the daughter everyone expected him to marry. That's when Emma's father said the words that changed everything. Get out of my house. If you want to know how a forgotten daughter became the woman who rebuilt an empire, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The wind cut through Emma Calloway's coat like 1,000 frozen knives, but she barely felt it anymore. Pain had become normal. Cold had become expected. Being invisible had become her entire existence. She carried another load of firewood across the yard, her boots crunching through ankle-deep snow, her breath forming clouds in the bitter Montana air. Inside the main house, she could hear piano music, Clara practicing for tonight's dinner party. The notes floated out through the windows, delicate and perfect, like everything her younger sister touched. Emma dropped the wood beside the kitchen door and flexed her hands. The blisters had blisters now, 26 years old, and her hands looked like they belonged to someone twice her age. Emma! Her father's voice boomed from inside. Where's that firewood? Our guests will be here in 2 hours. She didn't bother answering. Richard Calloway never actually wanted answers. He wanted compliance. Emma pushed through the kitchen door, tracking snow across floors Clara would complain about later. The warmth inside hit her face, making her cheeks burn. Martha, their aging housekeeper, looked up from the stove with something like pity in her eyes. You should change before they arrive, Martha said quietly. At least wash your face. Why? Emma grabbed a cloth and started wiping down the wood she'd brought in. Nobody's going to look at me anyway. It was true. Tonight's dinner party had one purpose: parading Clara in front of Cole Bennett like a prize mare at auction. The Bennett family owned half of Montana, and Cole, 30 years old, unmarried, and reportedly handsome, was shopping for a wife. Every family with an eligible daughter had tried. Clara was Richard Calloway's final gamble to save the ranch from drowning in debt. Emma had stopped being part of her father's plans years ago. She remembered the exact moment it happened. She was 14, all elbows and scraped knees when her mother died of fever. Clara was only 11 then, still soft and pretty and fragile. Someone had to keep the ranch running while Richard drank himself through his grief. Emma started waking up before dawn to feed the animals. She learned to fix broken fences because they couldn't afford to hire help. She figured out how to treat sick cattle because the veterinarian wanted payment Richard couldn't provide. And somewhere along the way, her father stopped seeing her as a daughter and started seeing her as labor. Clara got the dresses. Emma got the chores. Clara got the piano lessons. Emma got the stable work. Clara got called darling. Emma got called when something needed fixing. At least put on a clean shirt. Martha tried again, her voice gentle. You're still part of this family. Emma looked down at her dusty work clothes, at the patches she'd sewn herself, at the hem stained with mud and manure and years of being invisible. Am I? She asked. Before Martha could answer, Clara swept into the kitchen in a dress that probably cost more than Emma had spent on clothes in 5 years. Her blonde hair was pinned up in elaborate curls. Her skin looked like porcelain. She was everything Emma wasn't: delicate, beautiful, valuable. Emma, you smell like the barn. Clara wrinkled her nose. Please don't come downstairs during dinner. Wasn't planning on it. Good. Clara checked her reflection in the window glass, adjusting a curl. Tonight has to be perfect. Do you understand? Cole Bennett is our only chance. Emma bit back the words burning in her throat. Your only chance. Father's only chance. She'd stopped being part of our a long time ago. Papa says if I can get Cole interested, he'll propose within a month. Clara's voice carried the dreamy quality of someone who'd been fed fairy tales instead of reality. Can you imagine? Me, Mrs. Cole Bennett, living at that enormous ranch, never worrying about money again. Sounds perfect, Emma said flatly. It will be. Clara turned from the window, and for just a moment, something uncertain flickered across her face. You don't think I'm being foolish, do you? Waiting for him to choose me? Emma looked at her sister, really looked at her, and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Fear. Beneath all that polish and beauty, Clara was terrified. "No," Emma said, softer now. "I think you'll be exactly what he expects." Clara's smile returned, bright and relieved. She left the kitchen in a swirl of expensive fabric, already mentally planning her future. Martha moved beside Emma, her weathered hand touching Emma's shoulder. "You deserve better than this, child." "Maybe." Emma started stacking firewood. "But deserving and getting are two different things." The next 2 hours blurred together. Emma hauled more wood, checked the horses, made sure the barn was secure against the coming storm. By the time the Bennett family's carriage arrived, she was exhausted, freezing, and covered in enough dirt that she looked like she'd been working underground. She should have stayed in the barn. She meant to stay in the barn. But something drew her back toward the house. Curiosity, maybe, or the small, stubborn part of her that still remembered being part of a family. Emma slipped through the kitchen door just as her father's voice boomed in greeting from the parlor. She could hear masculine voices responding, the rustle of expensive coats being removed, Clara's musical laugh. "Emma, what are you doing?" Martha hissed. "You can't." "I just want to see him," Emma whispered back. "Just once. Then I'll disappear." She crept toward the parlor door, staying in the shadows where the lamplight didn't reach. Through the doorway, she could see her father playing the gracious host, his face red from whiskey and false cheer. Clara sat on the good sofa, the one Emma wasn't allowed to touch with work clothes, looking like a painting. And then Emma saw Cole Bennett. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face that had probably made half the women in Montana lose their senses. But what struck Emma wasn't his looks. It was the way he stood, rigid, uncomfortable, like a man being led to his execution rather than a dinner party. His father, Victor Bennett, stood beside him. Older, harder, with eyes that looked like they could calculate a man's worth in seconds. "Clara, my dear, you've grown into quite the young lady," Victor said, his voice smooth as creek stones. "Hasn't she, Cole?" Cole's response was polite but distant. "She has." Emma recognized that tone. She'd heard it from merchants who complimented her father's horses while calculating how little they could pay. Cole Bennett was going through the motions, nothing more. But then his eyes shifted. Emma didn't realize she'd stepped too far into the lamplight until Cole's gaze locked onto hers. She froze, suddenly aware of how she must look. Work clothes, dirty face, hair falling out of its braid. She expected him to look away in disgust. He didn't. His expression changed to something Emma couldn't read. Not pity, not judgment, something else entirely. "Who's that?" Cole asked. The parlor went silent. Richard Calloway's face flushed darker. "That's Emma, my older daughter. She's been working in the barn. Emma, go clean yourself up." It was a dismissal, a command, the same tone he'd use on a misbehaving dog. Emma should have obeyed. She'd spent 12 years learning to obey. But something about the way Cole was looking at her, really seeing her, made her lift her chin instead. "I was checking the horses before the storm hits," she said, her voice steady. "We're expecting heavy snow tonight. If you're planning to leave before midnight, you should consider starting earlier." Victor Bennett's eyebrow rose. "Concerned about our safety, are you?" "Concerned about my father's horses having to pull your carriage through 3-foot drifts," Emma replied. "They're already underfed." The words came out before she could stop them. True, but catastrophically inappropriate. Richard looked like he might have a stroke. "Emma!" he barked. "Leave, now!" But Cole spoke first. "She's right. The wind's already picking up." He looked at Emma, and something in his expression reminded her of recognition. "You know the weather patterns here?" "I've lived here my whole life," Emma said. "I know when a storm's coming." "Then we should listen to her." Cole turned to his father. "We can cut the evening short. Better than risking the roads." Victor looked annoyed, but nodded. "Very well." Emma didn't wait for her father's rage. She turned and walked back into the kitchen, her heart pounding. Martha stared at her like she'd just wrestled a bear. "What were you thinking?" Martha whispered frantically. "I don't know." Emma's hands were shaking. "I wasn't thinking." For 12 years, she'd been invisible. For 12 years, she'd kept her head down and her mouth shut. And in 30 seconds, she'd just shattered every careful plan her father had made. The dinner was short and tense. Emma stayed in the kitchen, listening to the strained conversation filter through the walls, Clara's attempts at charm, Richard's increasingly desperate joviality, and beneath it all the howling wind as the storm Emma had predicted rolled in right on schedule. She was scrubbing dishes when she heard the parlor door open. "Absolutely unacceptable," her father was saying, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "I apologize for my daughter's rudeness." "Which daughter?" Cole's voice cut through. "The one who warned us about the storm, or the one who didn't notice it coming?" Silence. Emma risked a glance through the doorway. Cole was already in his coat, but he was looking around the kitchen like he was searching for something. For someone. "Mr. Bennett," Richard tried again, his desperation showing now. "Clara is an exceptional young woman, educated, accomplished." "I'm sure she is." Cole's tone was polite but final. "Thank you for dinner." The Bennetts left quickly, their carriage disappearing into the swirling snow. Richard stood in the doorway until their lights vanished, then turned slowly toward the kitchen. Emma knew that look. "Get out here," he said quietly. She walked into the parlor. Clara sat on the sofa, her perfect face blotchy with tears. Martha had vanished, smart enough to disappear when Richard's temper ignited. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard's voice was soft, which was worse than yelling. "Any idea at all?" "I told them about the storm. You embarrassed this family." His voice rose now. "You stood there in your filthy work clothes, contradicted me in front of the most powerful family in Montana, and destroyed the only chance we had to save this ranch." "I didn't destroy anything. I told the truth." "The truth?" Richard laughed, harsh and bitter. "The truth is that you're a 26-year-old spinster who works like a ranch hand because no man would ever want you as a wife. The truth is that Clara is our only asset, and you just made her look foolish by comparison." The words hit like physical blows, but Emma had heard variations of them for years. They didn't hurt as much as they used to. "If Clara looked foolish," Emma said quietly, "it's because she didn't know about the storm. And I did." Richard's hand moved so fast Emma didn't have time to flinch. The slap cracked across her face, snapping her head to the side. "Papa!" Clara gasped. "Stay out of this!" Richard snarled. He grabbed Emma's arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You will stay away from the Bennett family. You will stay in the barn where you belong. And if you ever, ever embarrass this family again, I will throw you out with nothing. Do you understand me?" Emma tasted blood where her teeth had cut her lip. She looked at her father, this man who'd given her life but never love, and felt something inside her finally break. Not break down, break free. "Yes," she said. "I understand." Richard released her and turned away, pouring himself more whiskey. Clara sat frozen on the sofa, her tears forgotten, staring at Emma with something that might have been guilt. Emma walked back to the kitchen, past Martha, who pressed a cold cloth into her hands without a word, and out into the storm. The barn was dark and cold, but it was away from the house. Away from her father's rage and Clara's pity and the suffocating weight of being unwanted in her own home. She climbed up into the hayloft where she sometimes slept when the house felt too poisonous, wrapped herself in an old horse blanket, and let the tears finally come. Not because her father had hit her, he'd done that before. Not because he'd called her worthless. She'd heard that 1,000 times. But because, for just 30 seconds in that parlor, when Cole Bennett looked at her, Emma had felt seen. Like she was a person instead of a problem. Like she mattered. And now that feeling was gone, crushed under her father's rage and her own stupidity. The storm howled outside, and Emma cried herself to sleep in the hay. She woke to someone calling her name. Not her father's bark, not Clara's impatient whine. A man's voice, unfamiliar and concerned? Emma sat up too fast, her head spinning. Pale morning light filtered through the barn slats. The storm had passed, leaving everything buried in white. Emma Calloway? She looked down from the loft and froze. Cole Bennett stood in the barn doorway, snow dusting his expensive coat, looking up at her with those same eyes that had seen her the night before. "What are you doing here?" Emma's voice came out rough from crying. "Looking for you." He stepped further into the barn. "Your father said you'd be here." "He sent you to—" Emma stopped. No. Richard wouldn't send anyone to find her. "Why are you looking for me?" Cole pulled off his gloves, and Emma noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Not from cold, from nerves. "I need to hire a guide," he said. "Someone who knows this ranch, the land. The real situation, not the version your father presents in his parlor." Emma climbed down from the loft, very aware of the hay in her hair and the bruise probably blooming on her face. "Why?" "Because last night you were the only person who told me the truth." Cole met her eyes. "The storm hit exactly when you said it would. We barely made it home. If we'd stayed for the full dinner my father planned—" He shook his head. "I need someone who deals in reality, not performance. Will you help me?" This had to be a trick, a test, some elaborate plan her father had concocted. "I don't understand," Emma said slowly. "You came here to meet Clara. Everyone knows that. I came here because my father is pressuring me to marry." Cole's jaw tightened. "He's shown me 24 eligible daughters in 24 parlors, and they all blur together. Perfect dresses, perfect manners, perfect lies about perfect ranches." "Clara's not lying." "No, but she's not telling the truth either." Cole took a step closer. "Last night, I heard you tell your father the horses are underfed. I saw the fences falling apart when we rode in. I noticed your father's hands don't have a single callus, but yours are covered in blisters." Emma instinctively hid her hands behind her back. "This ranch is dying," Cole continued. "Isn't it?" Emma could lie. She could protect her father's pride and Clara's chances and keep playing the role she'd been assigned. Or she could tell the truth. "Yes," she said. "We are drowning in debt. The cattle are thin because we can't afford enough feed. The fences are falling apart because my father fired the ranch hands months ago. We're surviving on credit that's about to run out." "And Clara?" "Clara's been raised to be a beautiful solution to an ugly problem." Emma's voice was bitter. "She doesn't know about the debt. She doesn't know we're 3 months from losing everything. She just knows she's supposed to smile and play piano and marry well." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "And you?" "I know how to fix fences," Emma said. "I know which cattle are sick and which pastures need rotation and where the water rights boundary runs. I know everything about running this ranch except how to save it because my father won't listen to anything I say." "Will you show me?" Cole asked. "Today. I want to see the real ranch, all of it. The broken parts and the buried problems and the truth nobody wants to talk about." "My father will never allow—" "I already asked him." Cole's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I told him I needed to survey the land before considering any kind of arrangement. He agreed immediately." Of course he did. Richard would agree to anything that kept Cole Bennett interested. "He thinks you want Clara to show you around," Emma said. "I specifically requested you." Emma's heart did something strange in her chest. "Why?" Cole looked at her for a long moment, and Emma couldn't read his expression. "Because I'm tired of performance. I want to see what's real. Real isn't very pretty. I'm starting to think pretty isn't very real." Emma should have said no, should have protected herself from whatever game this was, but something in Cole's eyes reminded her of that feeling from last night, of being seen, and she was desperate enough to chase it just one more time. "Fine," she said, "but I need to saddle the horses, and you should know that whatever you're expecting, the truth is probably worse." "I'll risk it," Cole said. They rode out an hour later, Emma on her aging gelding and Cole on a borrowed mare. Richard had watched them leave with barely concealed frustration. This wasn't how the courtship was supposed to go, but he couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. Clara had watched from the window, her face unreadable. Emma led Cole across the eastern pasture where broken fence posts leaned at drunken angles. "We need to replace 40 posts minimum," she said, her voice flat and factual. "But lumber costs money we don't have. I've been stealing wood from the old equipment shed and cutting it down myself." "You cut the fence posts yourself?" Cole looked at her. "Someone has to." They rode further, and Emma showed him the water dispute that had been poisoning the ranch for 3 years. "The Hendersons upstream built a dam. It cut our water flow by half. My father tried to fight it legally, but lawyers cost money. So now our cattle walk an extra mile to reach the creek, and we've lost 2 calves this year to dehydration." Cole's expression darkened. "That's illegal." "Probably, but proving it requires resources we don't have." Everywhere they rode, Emma peeled back the careful lies her father had maintained. The sick cattle hidden in the far pasture, The equipment held together with wire and prayer, the mortgage payments her father had missed, the neighboring ranchers who'd stopped doing business with them because Richard Calloway's word had become worthless. She expected Cole to make excuses and leave. Instead, he asked questions, real questions, about soil quality and water rights and herd management, questions that proved he actually understood ranching, not just the gentleman's version of it. "You've been running this place alone," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "My father makes the decisions," Emma replied carefully. "I just implement them." "Bad decisions." "Not always, sometimes," Emma sighed. "Mostly." They stopped on a ridge overlooking the ranch. From here, you could see the peeling paint on the main house, the sagging barn roof, the two thin cattle dotting the brown fields. "Why do you stay?" Cole asked. Emma had never been asked that before. "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. You're 26. You're clearly capable. I'm a 26-year-old woman with no money, no education beyond what my mother taught me, and hands that look like I've been in fistfights with fence posts." Emma held up her blistered palms. "What respectable work would I find? Who would hire me?" "Someone smart enough to recognize your value." Emma laughed, harsh and sharp. "My own father doesn't recognize my value. I'm just the daughter who's too rough and too honest and too much like a ranch hand to be useful for anything but manual labor." "Your father's a fool." The words were said so matter-of-factly that Emma didn't know how to respond. They rode back in silence as the sun began its descent. When they reached the barn, Cole dismounted but didn't leave. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me the truth." "You're welcome." Emma started unsaddling her horse. "Though I'm not sure what good it does you. This ranch isn't worth investing in, and Clara—" She stopped. "Clara what?" Emma focused on the saddle straps. "Clara deserves better than to be sold to solve our father's problems." "You care about her," Cole observed, "even though she gets everything you don't. She's still my sister." Emma set the saddle aside. "And she's not a bad person. She's just been raised to be one thing. She doesn't know how to be anything else." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, "What were you raised to be?" "Invisible," Emma said without thinking. Then she shook her head. "That's not fair. I was raised to survive, to work, to keep things running. I just forgot I was supposed to be a person too." "Emma." She turned to look at him. "You're the most real person I've met in months," Cole said quietly. "Maybe years." Emma's throat went tight. "You don't know me. I know you told me the truth when lying would have been easier. I know you protect your sister even when she doesn't protect you. I know you've been holding this ranch together with blisters and stubbornness." He took a step closer. "That's more than I know about most of the women I've been paraded in front of." "They were raised to be wives," Emma said. "I was raised to fix fences. Maybe I need someone who can do both." The words hung in the cold air between them. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she thought Cole might hear it. "You should go," she managed, "before my father comes looking for you." Cole nodded slowly, but he didn't move. "One more question." "What?" "If you could choose your own life, no father, no debt, no expectations, what would you choose?" No one had ever asked Emma that. She'd spent so many years being what was needed that she'd forgotten to imagine what she wanted. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe you should figure it out," Cole said. He pulled on his gloves, nodded once, and walked toward his horse. Emma stood in the barn doorway and watched him ride away, her mind spinning with impossible thoughts. That night, her father announced that Cole Bennett would be joining them for dinner again tomorrow night. "This is it," Richard said, his eyes gleaming with desperate hope. "He's interested, I can tell. Clara, you need to be perfect tomorrow, absolutely perfect." Clara nodded, her face pale. "And Emma," Richard turned his cold gaze on her, "you will stay in the barn. I don't care if the house is on fire. You will not interfere again. Understood?" "Understood," Emma said. But she caught Clara's eye across the table, and for the first time in years her sister looked uncertain, almost guilty. Emma went to the barn and climbed back into the hayloft, but she didn't cry this time. She lay in the darkness and thought about Cole's question. What would you choose? And for the first time in 12 years, Emma let herself imagine a life that wasn't built on other people's expectations. She had no idea that tomorrow night everything would shatter, or that she'd finally find the courage to choose herself. The next evening arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. Emma spent the day avoiding the house, fixing a gate that didn't really need fixing, mucking out stalls that were already clean, anything to stay away from the chaos of preparation inside. Through the barn walls, she could hear Clara practicing piano. The same piece, over and over, until the notes blurred together into meaningless sound. Martha found her around 3 in the afternoon, carrying a plate of bread and cheese. "You need to eat something," the housekeeper said, setting the plate on a hay bale. "Not hungry." "Liar." Martha sat down heavily, her old knees creaking. "That man's got you all twisted up inside, doesn't he?" Emma's hands stilled on the bridle she was pretending to mend. "I don't know what you mean." "Cole Bennett. The way he looked at you yesterday. The way you haven't stopped thinking about it since. He came here for Clara. Maybe he did." Martha's weathered face creased in something between sympathy and knowing. "But that's not who he's thinking about now." Emma threw down the bridle. "It doesn't matter. Father's made it clear I'm not part of whatever happens tonight. I'm just the stable girl who fixes things when they break." "You're more than that, child. You always have been." "Tell that to my father." Martha was quiet for a moment. "Your mother would be proud of you, you know, the way you've held this place together, the way you haven't let bitterness poison you completely." Emma's throat went tight. She didn't talk about her mother much. It hurt too much, remembering the woman who'd actually seen her, actually loved her. "She'd also tell you to stop hiding," Martha added gently. "Stop making yourself small because it's easier than fighting." "I'm not hiding. I'm obeying orders." "Same thing sometimes." Before Emma could respond, they heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Emma moved to the barn door and looked out to see not just Cole Bennett arriving, but his father Victor as well, along with 2 men Emma didn't recognize. Richard practically ran out of the house to greet them, his face flushed with excitement and too much whiskey already. "Mr. Bennett, and you've brought associates. Wonderful, wonderful. Please, come in. Claire's been looking forward to your visit all day." Emma watched Cole dismount. He looked uncomfortable in his expensive suit, his eyes scanning the property like he was cataloging every broken thing he saw. Then his gaze found the barn. Found her. Emma stepped back into the shadows, but not before she saw something shift in his expression. "Actually," Cole said, his voice carrying across the yard, "I'd like to speak with Emma first, if that's acceptable." Richard's smile faltered. "Emma? But surely you'd prefer—" "I'd prefer to speak with Emma," Cole repeated, firmer this time. Victor Bennett's eyes narrowed. "Cole, what are you doing?" "Having a conversation." Cole was already walking toward the barn. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This was going to make everything worse. Cole reached the barn door, and for a moment they just stared at each other. "You're supposed to be courting Clara," Emma said quietly. "I'm supposed to be finding a wife." Cole glanced back at the house where Richard stood frozen, then looked at Emma again. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" Emma knew this was a terrible idea. Knew her father would explode. Knew Clara would be devastated. She nodded anyway. They walked away from the barn, away from the house, following a path through the snow toward the old equipment shed at the edge of the property. Neither spoke until they were out of earshot. "I can't stop thinking about what you showed me yesterday," Cole said finally. "The real ranch, the truth behind the performance. It's not a pretty truth." "No, but it's honest." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" Emma's stomach twisted. "I can try." "Do you want to stay here?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "This ranch, this life. Your father treating you like hired help. Clara getting everything while you get nothing. Do you actually want this?" Emma opened her mouth to give the expected answer. To say, of course, this was her home, her family, her responsibility. Instead, the truth came out. "No," she whispered. "I hate it here." Cole's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Then why do you stay?" "Because I don't have a choice. Because women like me don't get choices." Emma's voice cracked. "You asked me yesterday what I'd choose if I could. I still don't know. But I know it wouldn't be this. It wouldn't be spending my whole life being invisible and unwanted and useful only when something needs fixing. You're not invisible to me. Stop. Emma turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. Please don't do that. Don't say things that make me hope for something impossible. Why is it impossible? Because you're Cole Bennett, and I'm the daughter nobody wanted. Because you came here for Clara. Because my father would rather burn this ranch to the ground than let me have something good. What if I don't want Clara? The words hung in the frozen air between them. Emma turned back slowly. You don't mean that. Yes, I do. Cole took a step closer. Clara is exactly what everyone expected. Beautiful, polished, accomplished. But when I talk to her, I feel like I'm talking to a performance. A very good performance, but still just empty. She's not empty. She's just been raised to be one thing. I know. And that's not her fault. Cole ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. But Emma, when I talk to you, I feel like I'm talking to a real person. Someone who has opinions and knowledge and isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. That's because I've got nothing to lose, Emma said bitterly. Clara has to perform because her whole future depends on pleasing you. I can be honest because nobody expects anything from me anyway. That's not true. Yes, it is. Emma's voice rose. You want to know why I can tell you the truth? Because the truth is all I have. I don't have pretty dresses or piano skills or any of the things men like you are supposed to want, so I might as well be honest because pretending to be something else won't change what I am. And what are you? Worthless. The word came out flat and final. At least according to my father. Cole's jaw tightened. Your father's wrong. Is he? I'm 26 and unmarried. I work like a ranch hand. My hands are calloused and my clothes are patched, and I probably smell like horses most of the time. What man would want that? I would. Emma's breath caught. Don't. Don't what? Don't tell you the truth? Cole moved closer, close enough that Emma could see the intensity in his eyes. You want honesty? Here it is. I've spent the last 3 months being paraded in front of eligible daughters across Montana. Beautiful women, accomplished women. Women who would make perfect wives by every measure my father values. And I felt nothing. Cole, shit. But yesterday, talking to you, seeing the way you run this ranch, even when nobody appreciates it, hearing you tell the truth even when lying would be easier. He shook his head. That's the first time I felt like I was talking to someone real, someone I could actually see a future with. Emma's heart was doing violent things in her chest. This couldn't be happening. This was some kind of dream or trick or cosmic joke. You came here for Clara, she said again, desperately. Everyone knows that. Your father knows that. My father's counting on that. I came here because my father's pressuring me to marry, and your father has daughters for sale. Cole's words were harsh, but true. But that doesn't mean I have to choose the one everyone expects. If you don't choose Clara, my father will lose everything. The ranch, the house, everything. He's counting on this arrangement to save him. That's not your responsibility. She's my sister. She's also not a child, Emma. She's a grown woman who's been raised to marry well and save the family. But you've been sacrificed to that same family your entire life. When does it become your turn? Emma couldn't answer. The question was too big, too impossible. Voices drifted from the house. Impatient voices. They'd been gone too long. We should go back, Emma said, before my father comes looking. I don't care what your father thinks. Well, I do, because I have to live here after you leave. Emma started walking back toward the barn. You'll go back to your enormous ranch and your powerful family, and I'll still be here fixing fences and being invisible. Cole caught her arm. What if you didn't have to stay here? What are you talking about? But before Cole could answer, Richard's voice cut through the cold air. Emma, get in the house, now! They both turned to see her father standing outside the barn, his face purple with rage. Victor Bennett stood beside him, looking coldly disapproving. Emma pulled her arm free from Cole's grip and started walking. Cole followed. What do you think you're doing? Richard hissed as they approached. Dragging Mr. Bennett out into the cold when Claire's been waiting, I asked to speak with Emma, Cole interrupted calmly. This wasn't her idea. Nevertheless, Richard grabbed Emma's arm hard enough to hurt. You're going to the barn. and you're staying there for the rest of the evening. Actually, Cole said, his voice taking on an edge Emma hadn't heard before, I'd like Emma to join us for dinner. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's grip on Emma's arm tightened. That's not necessary. Claire's been preparing. I'm aware. Cole looked at Victor, something unspoken passing between father and son. But I'd like Emma there as well. Victor's expression was unreadable. Cole, perhaps we should discuss. There's nothing to discuss. Cole's tone was final. Either Emma joins us or I'll take my dinner at the hotel in town. Emma had never seen her father look so trapped. Fury and desperation warred on his face. But Cole Bennett held all the cards, and Richard knew it. Fine, Richard ground out. Emma will join us. But she'll need to change first. She can't come to dinner dressed like that. Emma looked down at her work clothes, at the dirt and hay clinging to her skirts. I don't have anything else, she said quietly. Clara's voice came from the doorway. She can wear one of my old dresses. Everyone turned. Clara stood in the entrance, beautiful in dark blue silk, her face carefully blank. Clara, that's not, Richard started. It's fine. Clara's voice was ice. I have several I've outgrown. Emma can borrow one. The word borrow carried enough poison to kill a horse, but Clara's smile never wavered. 20 minutes later, Emma stood in Clara's bedroom, stuffed into a dress that was too tight in the shoulders and too short in the hem. Clara had chosen the plainest thing she owned, a brown dress with no ornamentation that made Emma look like a Quaker governess. There, Clara said, pulling Emma's hair back with brutal efficiency, you almost look presentable. Emma met her sister's eyes in the mirror. I didn't ask for this. No, you just threw yourself at him the moment he arrived. That's not what happened, isn't it? Clara's hand stilled in Emma's hair. He came here for me, Emma. Everyone knows that. And somehow you've managed to steal his attention with your sad stories and your rough hands and your honest truth. The last words were mocking. Clara, do you know what it's like? Clara's voice cracked. Being raised your entire life to be perfect? To smile and play piano and say the right things and be everything a man could want? And then watching it mean nothing because he'd rather talk to my sister, the stable girl? Emma turned to face her. You think I wanted this? You think I chose to be invisible my whole life while you got everything? Everything? Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. You think I got everything? You got to be yourself, Emma, rough and honest and real. I got to be a doll in a pretty dress, performing for men who see me as an investment. That's not my fault. No, it's father's fault. It's mother's fault for dying and leaving us with him. It's everyone's fault except yours, right? Clara's eyes filled with tears. But I'm the one who's going to pay for it. Because if Cole doesn't choose me, father will find someone else. Someone worse. Someone older or crueler or more desperate. And I'll still have to smile and be perfect and pretend it's what I want. Guilt twisted in Emma's stomach. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did happen. And now I have to go downstairs and watch the man I was supposed to marry look at you instead. Clara turned away. Just try not to embarrass us more than you already have. She left the room, her silk skirt swishing. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, feeling sick. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. But when she went downstairs and saw Cole's face light up slightly as she entered the dining room, something in her chest responded against her will. Dinner was torture. Richard sat at the head of the table, drinking steadily and making increasingly desperate attempts at conversation. Victor Bennett responded with cold politeness, clearly annoyed by the entire situation. The two associates Victor had brought barely spoke, just watched everything with calculating eyes. Clara performed perfectly. She asked intelligent questions, laughed at appropriate moments, and demonstrated exactly why she'd been trained her whole life for this. And Cole barely looked at her. His attention kept drifting to Emma, who sat silent and uncomfortable in her too-tight borrowed dress. So, Miss Emma, Victor said suddenly, his voice cutting through the awkward conversation. Cole tells me you're quite knowledgeable about ranch management. It was a trap. Emma could feel it. I know this ranch, she said carefully, but not others. You've never worked beyond your father's property. No, sir. Then your experience is rather limited, wouldn't you say? Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Running a small, failing ranch hardly qualifies you to understand larger operations. Richard's face flushed red, but he couldn't argue without admitting the ranch was failing. "You're right," Emma said quietly. "I don't know anything about large operations. I only know about survival, about making hard choices when there's no money and no help and no good options." "Survival isn't the same as success," Victor replied. "No, but success built on lies isn't real either." The table went silent. Victor's expression hardened. "Are you implying something, Miss Calloway?" Emma knew she should back down, should apologize, should be quiet and invisible like always. But she thought about Cole's question, about what she'd choose if she could choose her own life. "I'm saying that running a ranch honestly is harder than running one with unlimited resources," Emma said, her voice steady. "I'm saying that knowing how to fix a fence yourself is more valuable than knowing how to hire someone to fix it. I'm saying that understanding your land and your animals and your limits is more important than impressing investors. And I'm saying," Victor's voice was ice, "that a woman who works like a ranch hand might understand labor, but she'll never understand leadership." "Father," Cole started. "She's not suitable, Cole." Victor didn't look away from Emma. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. This girl has no education, no breeding, no understanding of what's required to manage an empire like ours." "She has more understanding than half the managers we've hired," Cole shot back. "She has calluses and opinions." Victor stood up. "That's not the same as competence." "At least she's honest about her limitations," Cole said. "Unlike the women you've been forcing me to court who pretend to care about ranching while knowing nothing about it." Richard looked like he might cry. "Mr. Bennett, please, I'm sure we can come to an understanding. The understanding should have been clear from the start." Victor turned his cold gaze on Richard. "You invited us here to consider your daughter as a potential match for my son, your younger daughter, the one raised appropriately for such an arrangement." "Yes, yes, of course." "Then why?" Victor's voice dropped dangerously low. "Has this entire evening been focused on the other one?" No one had an answer. Clara sat frozen, her perfect composure finally cracking. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't even bother wiping them away. Emma felt like she was watching a carriage crash in slow motion. "Clara is everything you described," Cole said quietly. "Beautiful, accomplished, appropriate. But she's not who I want." "Cole, don't," Victor started. "I want someone real." Cole looked directly at Emma. "Someone who understands work and sacrifice. Someone who tells the truth even when it costs her. Someone who's been tested by hardship and didn't break." "Someone completely unsuitable," Victor finished. "Unsuitable by your standards, not mine." Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss privately that can't be said here." Cole stood as well. "I came here to find a wife. I found someone. Just not the one everyone expected." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Clara made a choked sound and fled from the room. Richard looked between Cole and Emma, his face cycling through rage, desperation, and calculation. "Mr. Bennett," he said to Victor, ignoring Cole entirely, "I apologize for this confusion. Emma has always been difficult, but Clara is everything your son needs. My son has made his choice clear," Victor said coldly. "Unfortunate as it is." He stood and gestured to his associates. "We'll be leaving. Thank you for dinner." "Wait," Richard scrambled after them. "Surely we can discuss." But the Bennetts were already walking out, Victor's disgust evident in every rigid line of his body. Richard stood in the doorway, watching his salvation disappear into the night. Then he turned slowly to face Emma. She'd never seen such pure hatred in another person's eyes. "Get out," he said quietly. "Father," Emma started. "Get out!" His voice exploded through the room. "You've destroyed everything. Destroyed your sister's chances. Destroyed this family. Destroyed our last hope of survival." "I didn't do anything." "You exist!" Richard grabbed the whiskey bottle and threw it. Emma ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind her. "You've always existed when you shouldn't have. You should have been the boy I needed. You should have been beautiful like your sister. You should have been useful for something other than manual labor." Martha appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Mr. Calloway, please, stay out of this. Richard advanced on Emma. 26 years of feeding you, housing you, tolerating your presence, and this is how you repay me? By stealing your sister's only chance at a decent life? I didn't steal anything. Cole made his own choice, because you seduced him with your pathetic honesty act. Richard was close enough now that Emma could smell the whiskey on his breath. Playing the brave little ranch girl, showing him all our problems, making him feel sorry for you. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Emma? Explain to me how my worthless older daughter managed to catch the attention of the wealthiest man in Montana while my beautiful, accomplished younger daughter was ignored. Emma had no answer. She didn't understand it herself. Richard grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. I want you gone. Tonight. Take whatever you can carry and leave. I don't care where you go or what happens to you. You're no daughter of mine. Richard, she has nowhere to go, Martha tried. Then she should have thought of that before destroying this family. He shoved Emma toward the door. Get your things and get out. Emma stumbled, caught herself on the doorframe. Part of her wanted to fight, to scream that none of this was fair, that she'd spent her whole life holding this ranch together while he drank and gambled and made bad decisions. But another part of her, a part that had been growing since Cole first looked at her like she mattered, felt something unexpected. Relief. Fine, Emma said. Richard blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. What? I said fine. I'll leave. Emma straightened up, meeting her father's eyes. You want me gone? I'm gone. You've made it clear for years that I don't belong here anyway. Emma? Martha's voice was anguished. It's okay, Martha. Emma touched the old woman's shoulder. I'll be okay. She walked upstairs on shaking legs, went to the tiny room she'd slept in her whole life and looked around at the sparse furnishings. A narrow bed, a cracked mirror, a trunk containing her few possessions. She changed out of Clara's dress, left it folded neatly on the bed, and put on her warmest clothes. Took the little money she'd managed to save over the years, packed a bag with her mother's Bible, a change of clothes, and the pocket knife her mother had given her when she was 12. Clara appeared in the doorway, her face blotchy from crying. Are you really leaving? Father made it clear I don't have a choice. You could apologize, tell Cole you made a mistake, convince him to choose me instead. Clara's voice was desperate. Emma looked at her sister, this girl who'd been given everything Emma hadn't, who'd been loved and valued and prepared for a future while Emma fixed fences in the cold. I can't do that, Clara. Why not? Because Cole doesn't want you, and forcing him to choose you anyway wouldn't make you happy. It would just make you both miserable. At least I'd be secure. Clara wiped her eyes. At least I'd have a future. You still have a future, just not the one Father planned. Emma picked up her bag. You're smart and capable and strong. You've just never had to be those things because Father wanted you to be beautiful instead. That's easy for you to say. You're the one he wants? He doesn't want me, Clara. He barely knows me. He just sees something real instead of a performance. Emma moved toward the door. Maybe that's what you should try, being real instead of perfect. She walked past her sister, down the stairs where Martha waited with tears streaming down her wrinkled face. I packed you some food. Martha pressed a bundle into Emma's hands. And there's a little money sewn into the lining of your bag. Not much, but something. Martha, I can't. Yes, you can. Your mother would want you to have it. Martha pulled Emma into a fierce hug. You're stronger than all of them, child. Don't you forget that. Emma held on tight, letting herself be held for just a moment. Then she stepped back, shouldered her bag, and walked out into the cold Montana night. She didn't look back at the house, didn't let herself think about what came next. She just started walking toward town, toward the hotel where travelers stayed, toward whatever future waited beyond her father's ranch. She'd made it maybe half a mile when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Emma turned, expecting her father coming to drag her back or throw more accusations. Instead, she saw Cole Bennett riding toward her through the darkness. He reined in his horse beside her, and even in the dim moonlight, she could see the intensity in his expression. Where are you going? He asked. Away, like my father wanted. Emma, you should go home, Cole. You've caused enough trouble for one night. I caused trouble? He dismounted. Emma, I just told my father I want to marry you instead of your sister. That's not causing trouble. That's stating my intentions. Emma's heart stopped. What? Did you think I was playing some kind of game? Courting you as a joke? Cole moved closer. I meant what I said in there. You're real. You're honest. You're everything I've been looking for and didn't know I needed. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're brave enough to tell the truth when everyone else lies. I know you've held your family together through sacrifice and hard work. I know you deserve better than a father who treats you like property and a life that makes you miserable. So what are you suggesting? That I just run away with you? Emma laughed, but it came out broken. Your father made it very clear what he thinks of me, and mine just threw me out with nothing. What kind of future could we possibly have? The kind we build ourselves. Cole reached for her hand. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Emma. I'm not asking you to perform or pretend or be anything other than who you are. I'm just asking you to choose something different than this. Emma looked at their joined hands, her rough, blistered palm against his, and felt something crack open in her chest. I don't know how to do that, she whispered. I've spent my whole life being what other people needed. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. With me. Cole squeezed her hand gently. I can't promise it'll be easy. My father's furious, and he controls most of the Bennett empire. But I have my own ranch, smaller, but mine. We could make it work. Together. Why? Emma's voice broke. Why would you choose me? Why would you give up your father's approval and an easy life for someone like me? Because easy isn't the same as right. Cole's thumb traced across her knuckles. Because I'm tired of performance and pretending. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. She'd spent 26 years believing she was worthless, believing she was only valuable when she was useful, believing she'd never be chosen, never be wanted, never be enough. And here was Cole Bennett, offering her something she'd never imagined possible. A choice. Come with me, Cole said quietly. Not because you have to. Not because there's nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Because you're choosing yourself for once. Emma thought about her father's house, cold and poisonous behind her. Thought about years of blisters and silence and being invisible. Thought about Clara's perfect performances and Martha's sad eyes and a future that looked exactly like her past. Then she thought about Cole's question from yesterday. What would you choose? She still didn't know what she wanted, still didn't understand how to build a life for herself instead of everyone else, but maybe that was okay. Maybe choosing didn't mean having all the answers. Maybe it just meant being brave enough to try. Okay, Emma whispered. Cole's expression shifted into something between relief and joy. Okay? Okay. I'll come with you. Emma wiped her eyes. I don't know if this is brave or stupid or completely insane, but I'm choosing it anyway. Cole pulled her into a hug, and Emma let herself be held, let herself feel wanted, let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe she deserved something good. When they pulled apart, Cole helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. Emma took one last look at the dark silhouette of her father's ranch. Then she turned her face forward toward the unknown, toward whatever came next. They rode through this darkness for hours, the horse's breath coming in white clouds, the snow muffled under its hooves. Emma sat rigid in front of Cole, her bag clutched against her chest, watching the familiar landscape disappear behind them. She'd left. She'd actually left. The reality of it kept hitting her in waves. No more fixing her father's fences, no more being invisible, no more pretending she didn't matter. But also no more Martha, no more familiar barn, no more certainty about what each day would bring. You're shaking, Cole said quietly behind her. I'm cold. You're terrified. Emma didn't argue. He was right. They reached the Bennett property just before dawn. Emma had seen it from a distance before, but riding through the gates felt different. The main house loomed against the lightening sky. 3 stories of stone and timber, windows dark and watchful. Nothing like her father's crumbling ranch house. Everything about this place spoke of power and money and permanence. Emma felt like an intruder. Cole helped her down from the horse, and she stood in the yard feeling small and dirty and completely out of place. Wait here, Cole said. I'll see if my father's awake. Cole? But he was already walking toward the house. Emma stood alone in the pre-dawn cold, clutching her pathetic bag, wondering what she'd just done. A door opened, but not the main house. A smaller building to the side. Servants' quarters, maybe. An older woman emerged, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Who are you?" she asked, not unkindly. "Emma, I came with Cole." The woman's eyebrows rose. "You're the Calloway girl, the one all the fuss was about last night." "I suppose." The woman looked Emma up and down, taking in her work clothes and worn bag. "I'm Mrs. Brennan. I run the household staff. You look frozen. Come inside." Cole said to wait. "Cole can find you in the kitchen as easily as he can find you standing in the yard like a lost sheep." Mrs. Brennan gestured impatiently. "Come on." Emma followed her into the warm kitchen, grateful despite her nervousness. Mrs. Brennan poured her coffee without asking and set bread and butter on the table. "Eat! You look half-starved." Emma was too hungry to refuse. The bread was better than anything she'd eaten in months. "So," Mrs. Brennan settled into a chair across from her, "you're the one young Cole wants instead of the pretty sister." Emma swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Didn't ask if you meant to. Asked if you're the one." Mrs. Brennan's sharp eyes studied her. "Though I can see why. You look like someone who works for a living." "Is that a compliment?" "Depends. Most girls who come through here looking to catch Cole's eye are about as useful as decorative pillows. Pretty to look at, useless for anything else." She refilled Emma's coffee. "But you've got calluses, real ones, and dirt under your nails you actually earned." Emma looked down at her hands, suddenly self-conscious. "Don't be ashamed of honest work," Mrs. Brennan said, "though you'll find plenty here who look down on it. Victor Bennett most of all. He hates me. He hates anyone who threatens his control over Cole. That's not about you specifically." Mrs. Brennan stood as voices echoed from the main house. "But you should know what you're walking into. This isn't a love story, girl. It's a war." Before Emma could ask what she meant, Cole appeared in the doorway. His face was tight with barely controlled anger. "My father wants to see you." Emma's stomach dropped. "Now?" "Now." She followed Cole through elegant hallways lined with paintings and expensive rugs. Everything was clean, polished, perfect. Emma felt like she was tracking mud through a museum. Victor Bennett's study was all dark wood and leather. He sat behind a massive desk, and even sitting down, he looked like a man used to dominating every room he entered. Cole's mother, or a painting of her, hung on the wall behind Victor. She looked young and beautiful and sad. "Sit," Victor said to Emma. Not an invitation, a command. Emma sat. Cole stood beside her chair like a guard. "I'll be direct," Victor said. "You're a problem." Emma didn't respond. What could she say? "My son has developed an attachment to you, against all reason and propriety." Victor's cold eyes examined her. "I assume you encouraged this. Perhaps you thought catching the Bennett heir would solve your family's financial troubles." "Father," Cole started, "I'm speaking to her." Victor didn't look away from Emma. "Did you or did you not pursue my son's attention?" "No," Emma said quietly. "I tried to stay away from him." "Yet here you are, in my house, having fled your father's property in the middle of the night with my son." "I left because my father threw me out. Convenient timing." Victor leaned back in his chair. "Let me explain something to you, Miss Calloway. The Bennett name carries weight in this territory, responsibility, legacy. I've spent 30 years building an empire that will last generations. I will not watch my son throw it away on a stable girl with dirt under her fingernails." The words were meant to cut, and they did. But Emma had heard worse from her own father. "I understand," she said. "Do you?" Victor's voice hardened. "Do you understand that if Cole marries you, he'll be cut off? No inheritance, no position in the family business, nothing." "Victor, that's not—" Cole's voice was tight. "That's exactly what will happen." Victor finally looked at his son. "You want to throw away everything I've built for this girl? Fine, but you'll do it without my money or my name." "The ranch mother left me is in my name," Cole said. "You can't touch that." "No. But it's small, barely profitable. You think you can run it with no support? No connections? No access to the resources I provided your entire life? Victor's smile was cruel. You'll fail within a year. Then I'll fail. Cole's hand found Emma's shoulder. But at least I'll fail on my own terms. Something shifted in Victor's expression, not softening exactly, but a flicker of something that might have been respect. You're a fool, he said finally. Just like your mother. The mention of Cole's mother seemed to hang in the air. Emma glanced at the painting again, the sad eyes. Your mother chose love over sense too, Victor continued. Insisted on keeping that rundown ranch her father left her instead of selling it for profit. Spent years trying to make it work. His voice went flat. It killed her in the end. That's not true, Cole started. She died of fever because she was out checking fences in a storm. Because she refused to let the hands do work she thought she should do herself. Victor's eyes found Emma. She was stubborn and idealistic and convinced she could fix things through hard work. Sound familiar? Emma felt like she'd been slapped. If you're trying to scare Emma away, Cole said, his voice dangerous, it won't work. I'm trying to prevent you from making the same mistake I did. Victor stood. I loved your mother. That didn't stop her from dying. That didn't stop her from choosing her principles over her safety. And it didn't stop me from having to watch her destroy herself trying to prove something that didn't matter. The room went silent. You can stay tonight, Victor said finally. Mrs. Brennan will find you a room. But tomorrow, you both leave. Take Eleanor's ranch. Do whatever foolish thing you're planning. But don't come back here expecting help when it falls apart. We won't, Cole said. Victor's eyes met Emma's one more time. You'll regret this, both of you. Then he turned away, dismissing them. Cole led Emma back through the silent house to a small bedroom in the east wing. It was nicer than any room Emma had ever slept in, but it felt cold and unwelcoming. Get some rest, Cole said. We'll leave in the morning. Cole? Emma's voice cracked. What he said about your mother was meant to hurt us. Cole's jaw was tight. Don't let him. But after he left, Emma lay in the unfamiliar bed and couldn't stop thinking about the sad-eyed woman in the painting, about choosing love over sense, about dying for principles that didn't matter. She barely slept. The next morning, they left before dawn. Cole loaded a wagon with supplies, things his father apparently couldn't stop him from taking since they belonged to the smaller ranch. Emma helped silently, aware of the household staff watching from windows. Mrs. Brennan appeared as they were finishing, pressing a basket of food into Emma's hands. For the journey, she said, then quieter. Eleanor would have liked you. Emma didn't know what to say to that. They rode out as the sun rose, following a road that led deeper into Bennett territory. Emma had never been this far from her father's ranch. Everything felt foreign and strange. Tell me about your mother's ranch, she said finally, needing to break the silence. Cole was quiet for a moment. It's small, maybe 100 acres. The house needs work. The fences need replacing. The herd's down to maybe 40 head, so it's falling apart. Yes. And your father's right. We'll probably fail. Probably. Cole glanced at her. Having second thoughts? Emma considered lying, considered pretending to be braver than she felt. Yes, she said instead. Constant second thoughts. But I'm still here. Something in Cole's expression softened. That's all I'm asking. They reached the property by midday. Emma's first thought was that it looked like her father's ranch. The same air of neglect, the same broken fences, the same sense of something dying slowly. The house was small but sturdy, built of logs and stone. The barn was in better shape than the house. A creek ran through the eastern pasture, and the mountains rose in the distance, still capped with snow. It's not much, Cole said. It's honest, Emma replied. They spent the afternoon unloading supplies. Cole showed Emma through the house. 3 rooms downstairs, 2 up, everything dusty from disuse. His mother's things were still here, furniture covered in sheets, books on shelves, a woman's coat hanging by the door. We should clear this out, Cole said, his voice strained. Not yet. Emma touched the coat gently. Not until you're ready. That night they made a fire in the stone hearth and ate Mrs. Brennan's food sitting on the floor because there was nowhere else to sit. It should have felt romantic or adventurous. Instead, it felt terrifying. What do we do now? Emma asked. We survive. Cole stared into the fire. We fix the fences. We rebuild the herd. We figure out how to make this work. And if we can't, then we can't. He looked at her. But at least we'll know we tried. Emma wanted to believe that would be enough. But she'd spent too many years watching her father's ranch fail to have many illusions about what failure looked like. The first week was brutal. They worked from dawn until dark, fixing fences, clearing brush, assessing the damage years of neglect had caused. Cole worked hard, but Emma noticed he didn't always know what he was doing. He'd been raised to manage workers, not do the work himself. Emma did know, and that created its own tension. You're doing it wrong, she said on the third day, watching him struggle with a fence post. I know how to set a post. Not in frozen ground, you don't. I don't need you to tell me how to do basic ranch work, Emma. The words came out sharper than he probably meant, but they stung anyway. Emma stepped back. Fine, do it your way. She walked away before he could respond, went to check the cattle, needing distance from the frustration building between them. This was the problem nobody talked about in stories about running away together. The reality of two people who barely knew each other trying to build a life from nothing. The friction and exhaustion and fear. Cole found her an hour later, standing by the creek. I'm sorry, he said. You were right about the post. I know. I'm not used to this. The actual work. I always had people to do it for me. I know that too. Emma didn't look at him. But we can't afford people, so you need to learn. Teach me then. Emma finally turned. Cole looked exhausted, his expensive clothes dirty and torn, his hands blistered like hers had been for years. You really want to do this? She asked. You could go back to your father, apologize, marry someone appropriate, have an easy life. I don't want easy. You say that now. But when it's the middle of winter and we're hungry and everything's falling apart, then we'll deal with it then. Cole moved closer. I'm not leaving, Emma. I'm not giving up. Stop waiting for me to disappoint you. I'm not. Yes, you are. You're waiting for me to realize I made a mistake, waiting for this to fall apart. His voice was gentle but firm. I chose this. I chose you. I'm not going anywhere. Emma wanted to believe him, but trust didn't come easy to someone who'd spent their whole life being disappointed. They worked in silence for the rest of the day, but it was a different kind of silence. Less angry, more understanding. That night, Emma taught Cole how to properly set a fence post in frozen ground. He listened and learned and didn't argue when she corrected him. It was a small thing, but it felt like progress. The second week, the snow came hard. They spent 3 days trapped inside while the storm raged, rationing food and keeping the fire going. Emma read her mother's Bible. Cole inventoried their supplies and made lists of what they'd need. We're going to run out of money, he said on the second day. I know. I have a little from my mother, but not enough to last through winter and buy seed for spring and rebuild the herd. Emma closed her Bible. Then we sell something. What? We barely have anything worth selling. Your horse, Emma said, the one you rode here. It's worth more than everything else we own combined. Cole's face went pale. That horse was my mother's. I know, but we need to eat. They stared at each other across the dim room. Emma could see the pain in Cole's eyes, but she could also see him calculating, understanding that she was right. There has to be another way, he said. If you find it, I'm listening. They didn't sell the horse. Not yet. But the conversation hung between them like a ghost. On the fourth week, a rider appeared. Emma saw him coming from a distance and felt her stomach drop. She knew that horse, knew that way of sitting in the saddle. Her father. Cole, she called. He emerged from the barn, saw the rider, and his expression hardened. They stood together in the yard as Richard Calloway rode up and dismounted. He looked worse than Emma had ever seen him, thinner, older. His hand shook as he tied his horse. Emma, he said, what do you want? To talk to you. Alone. No, Cole said flatly. Richard's eyes flicked to him with barely disguised hatred. This is between me and my daughter. She's not your daughter anymore, Cole replied. You made that clear when you threw her out. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. You meant them, Emma said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was racing. You've been saying them my whole life. You just finally said them out loud. Richard flinched. Emma, please, just give me 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, Emma nodded. Cole, go inside. Emma, please. Cole hesitated, then walked toward the house. But Emma noticed he stayed within earshot. What do you want? Emma asked again. Richard looked at the small ranch, at the work they'd been doing, at Emma's rough clothes and calloused hands. You're living in poverty. We're living honestly. You're living like hired help. Richard moved closer. Emma, come home. I was wrong to throw you out. You belong with family. I don't have a family. You made that clear. Clara misses you. Emma laughed, harsh and bitter. Clara hates me for ruining her chances with Cole. She doesn't hate you. She's struggling. Without you there to run things, the ranch is falling apart faster. And there it was. The real reason he'd come. You don't want me back because you miss me, Emma said. You want me back because you need someone to fix your fences and manage your cattle and keep your dying ranch alive a little longer. That's not... Don't lie to me. Not anymore. Emma's voice was cold. I spent 26 years being useful to you, being invisible and grateful for scraps of basic decency. I'm done. You'd rather live here? In this falling apart shack with a man you barely know? Yes. Emma met her father's eyes. Because at least here, I'm choosing my own misery instead of inheriting yours. Richard's face flushed red. You ungrateful... I was grateful. Emma's voice cracked. I was grateful for every scrap of attention, every rare moment you treated me like a daughter instead of a problem. But gratitude isn't love, Father, and you never loved me. That's not true. Yes, it is. You loved Clara because she was beautiful and marriageable and could save your ranch. You loved the idea of a son who never existed. But me? You just tolerated me, used me, and when I finally stopped being useful, you threw me away. Richard looked like she'd struck him. Emma, go home, Emma said. Sell the ranch. Make whatever deal you need to make. But leave me out of it. The ranch is your home too. No, it's not. It never was. Emma turned toward the house. Don't come back here. She walked away before he could respond, her whole body shaking. She heard him mount his horse, heard the hoofbeats fade into the distance. Only then did she let the tears come. Cole found her in the barn, sobbing into her hands. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her and let her cry. I shouldn't have sent him away, Emma choked out. He's my father. He's the man who hurt you for 26 years, Cole said quietly. You don't owe him forgiveness. But Clara's an adult. She'll survive. Emma wiped her eyes. What if I made the wrong choice? What if I should have gone back, should have been the bigger person, should have... Emma? Cole turned her face toward him. Stop. You didn't make the wrong choice. You made the brave choice. There's a difference. It doesn't feel brave. It feels selfish. Good. It should. Cole's thumb wiped away a tear. You spent your whole life being selfless. It's about time you were selfish. Emma wanted to believe that, but guilt was a hard thing to shake. The next day, Cole rode into town and came back with news that made Emma's stomach drop. Your father sold this ranch, he said, to a banker in exchange for his debts being forgiven. Clara's been sent to live with an aunt in St. Louis. Emma sat down hard. Clara's gone? She left yesterday. All of it. Gone. The ranch she'd kept alive through work and sacrifice. The sister she'd protected. The only life she'd ever known. Just erased. Are you okay? Cole asked. Emma didn't know how to answer. Part of her felt relieved. Part of her felt guilty. Part of her felt like she'd lost something she didn't know she still wanted. I don't know, she said finally. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Clara in St. Louis, alone and angry. About her father drinking himself to death in some cheap boarding house. About the ranch dying under new ownership. About all the ways she'd failed them by choosing herself. Cole found her sitting by the window, staring out at the dark mountains. You didn't fail them, he said, reading her mind. How do you know? Because you can't fail people who never gave you a chance to succeed. He sat beside her. They needed you to be small and useful and grateful. You chose to be yourself instead. That's not failure. Then why does it hurt so much? Cole didn't have an answer for that. Emma leaned against him and they sat in silence as the night wore on. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell and the mountains stood unchanging against the sky. And Emma realized something. She'd spent her whole life trying to save other people. Her father's ranch, Clara's future, Martha's peace of mind, everyone except herself. Maybe that had been the problem all along. "I want to fix this place," she said suddenly. "Not for your father or my father or anyone else. I want to fix it for us." Cole looked at her. "Even if it's hard?" "Especially if it's hard." Emma's voice was stronger now. "I'm tired of other people's failures. I want to build something that's ours. Even if it's small. Even if we fail, at least it'll be ours." "Then that's what we'll do," Cole said. And for the first time since she'd left her father's ranch, Emma felt like she could breathe. The work was still brutal. The money was still running out. The future was still uncertain. But it was theirs. And that had to be enough. Spring came slowly to Montana, dragging itself through mud and half-frozen ground. Emma and Cole worked until their hands bled, until exhaustion became a constant companion, until the small ranch started to look less like a graveyard and more like something that might survive. They replaced 40 fence posts, cleared 3 acres of brush, lost 2 calves to cold but saved the rest, learned to work together without arguing more than absolutely necessary. And somewhere in the middle of all that backbreaking work, they got married. It wasn't romantic. The preacher came to the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon because they couldn't afford to lose a day of work traveling to town. Mrs. Brennan showed up with food and witnessed the ceremony. Cole's father didn't come. Emma wore her cleanest work dress. Cole wore the same shirt he'd been mending fences in that morning. They said their vows standing in front of the fireplace, and Emma felt nothing like the brides she'd imagined as a girl. She felt terrified and committed and bound to someone she was still learning to know. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said. Cole kissed her gently, and Emma tasted uncertainty on both their lips. "Well," Mrs. Brennan said afterward, cutting the cake she'd brought, "that's done." It wasn't the celebration Emma had never let herself dream about, but it was honest. And maybe that was better. Life didn't get easier just because they were married. If anything, it got harder. The money ran out completely in April. They sold Cole's mother's horse, after all, and Emma watched Cole's face crack just a little as he handed over the reins. "I'm sorry," she said that night. "Don't be. You were right. We needed to eat." But she could hear the grief in his voice, and it made her chest ache. May brought a different kind of disaster. 40 head of cattle disappeared overnight from the far pasture. Just gone, like they'd evaporated into the mountains. Cole rode out at dawn to search for them. Emma went to check the fence line and found it cut clean through in 3 places. Not broken. Cut. Someone had stolen their cattle deliberately. Cole came back empty-handed and furious. "I found tracks leading toward Mercer land." Emma's stomach dropped. The Mercers owned the property north of them, and everyone knew about the water rights dispute that had been poisoning relations between the Mercers and the Bennetts for 20 years. "You think they took them? Who else?" Cole paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "They've been waiting for an excuse to strike at my family. And now that I'm isolated out here, they think they can steal from me without consequences. We don't know it was them. The tracks lead straight to their land, Emma." Cole slammed his fist on the table, making her flinch. "I'm riding over there." "To do what? Accuse them without proof?" "To get our cattle back before we starve this winter." Emma grabbed his arm as he headed for the door. "Cole, wait. Think about this. If you ride onto their property making accusations, you'll start a war. Maybe that's what it takes. Or maybe you'll get yourself killed." Emma's voice rose to match his. "We can't afford to lose 40 cattle, but we also can't afford to lose you. Just give me a day. Let me look into this before you do something we can't take back." Cole stared at her, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. "What are you going to do? Talk to them." "The Mercers won't talk to a Bennett. They'll shoot me on sight." "Then it's good I'm not a Bennett." Emma met his eyes. "Not in name, I'm still a Calloway, and the Mercers have no reason to shoot me." "Emma, this is insane. So is riding over there ready to start a gunfight?" Emma's voice was firm. "Let me try. If I can't get answers, then you can do whatever you think is necessary. But give me 1 day." Cole looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. 1 day. "But if you're not back by dark, I'm coming after you." Emma wrote out an hour later, her heart in her throat. The Mercer Ranch was smaller than the Bennett properties, but well maintained. She could see cattle grazing in the distance as she approached the main house. A man emerged onto the porch before she'd even dismounted. Late 50s, weathered face, rifle held casually but ready. "You're on private property," he said. "I know. I'm Emma Calloway. I married Cole Bennett a few weeks ago." The man's expression didn't change. "Congratulations. Now, get off my land." "Please, I just want to talk. We lost 40 head last night, and the tracks lead here. I know." The man, presumably Mercer, spat into the dirt. "Your husband sent you to accuse me of theft?" "No, he wanted to come himself, but I asked him to let me try first." Emma stayed on her horse, keeping her hands visible. "I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm here to find out what happened." "What happened is someone stole your cattle and made it look like we did it." Mercer's voice was hard. "We didn't touch your herd." "How do you know the tracks were meant to implicate you?" "Because whoever did it was sloppy. Real thieves don't leave obvious tracks, and we've got no reason to steal 40 scrawny cattle when we've got 200 healthy ones." Emma studied his face, looking for deception. She saw only anger. "If you didn't take them, who did?" "Someone who wants the Bennetts and Mercers at each other's throats." Mercer lowered his rifle slightly. "Which is most of this territory, considering what Victor Bennett's done over the years." "What did he do?" Mercer laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You married into that family and don't know? Victor stole our water rights 15 years ago. Forged documents, bribed the right people, made it legal on paper even though everyone knows the truth. We've been fighting it ever since." Emma felt cold. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. The Bennetts don't advertise their crimes." Mercer studied her. "You're not what I expected. Heard Victor's son married some desperate ranch girl. Thought you'd be, different." "Different how?" "Stupider. More willing to believe whatever your husband tells you." He tilted his head. "But you came here alone to find the truth instead of letting him start a war. That takes guts or desperation. Maybe both." "Both," Emma admitted. Something shifted in Mercer's expression. Not quite respect, but close. "Your cattle are probably in the canyon 3 miles west of here. There's an old line shack thieves use sometimes. If they're not there, they're already sold." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want a war with Cole Bennett. Not because I'm afraid of him, but because enough blood's been spilled over Victor's greed already." Mercer's eyes were hard. "Your husband's father is a snake, but maybe you and Cole are different. Maybe." Emma nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just find your cattle and tell your husband the Mercers didn't take them. Tell him if he wants to know who really stole from him, he should ask his father, who has reason to want this ranch to fail." The words hit Emma like a punch. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Victor Bennett doesn't like losing control. And his son running off with a nobody to manage a failing ranch?" Mercer's smile was grim. "That's the kind of insult Victor doesn't forgive. If I wanted to force my son back under my control, I'd make sure his little experiment collapsed. Fast." Emma rode away with her mind spinning. She found the line shack exactly where Mercer said it would be, and there were their cattle, penned in a makeshift corral. The thieves were gone, probably spooked by something. She drove the cattle back herself, arriving at the ranch just as the sun was setting. Cole was waiting in the yard, rifle in hand, looking ready to murder someone. "Emma!" He ran to her. "I was about to—" "I found them." Emma dismounted, exhausted. "They were in a line shack west of Mercer land. The Mercers didn't take them." "Then who did?" Emma looked at him, at this man she'd married, this person she was still learning to trust. "Cole, what do you know about the water rights dispute between your father and the Mercers?" His expression shuddered. "Why?" "Because Mercer told me your father stole their water rights years ago, forged documents, made it legal but not honest." Emma moved closer. "Is that true?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I was young when it happened. My father said the Mercers were lying, that he'd acquired the rights legitimately." But my mother didn't believe him." Cole's voice was strained. "She fought with him about it. Said he'd done something unforgivable. He told her to stay out of business matters." "Cole, Mercer thinks your father might have stolen our cattle to make the ranch fail, to force you back under his control." That's insane. My father wouldn't. Cole stopped. Would he? Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, Cole rode to the main Bennett ranch. Emma wanted to go with him, but he refused. This is between me and my father, he said. He came back 3 hours later, his face pale, his hands shaking. It was him, Cole said flatly. Not directly. He hired men to take the cattle and leave tracks pointing to the Mercers. He wanted us to fail. Wanted me to come crawling back, admitting I couldn't survive without him. Emma felt sick. What did you say to him? I told him I never wanted to see him again. Cole's voice cracked. He didn't even deny it. Just said he was teaching me a lesson about reality, about how the world actually works. Cole, my whole life I thought my father was hard but fair, ruthless but honest. Cole looked at Emma, and she saw something broken in his eyes. But he's not. He's just cruel. He'd rather destroy me than let me choose my own path. Emma pulled him into a hug, and Cole held on like a drowning man. They stood in the dark kitchen, clinging to each other, while everything they thought they knew about family collapsed around them. What do we do now? Emma whispered. We survive, Cole said, without him, without his money, or his approval, or his version of how things should be. He pulled back to look at her. Can we do that? We've been doing it already, Emma pointed out. Barely. Barely's better than not at all, Cole almost smiled. When did you get so optimistic? I'm not optimistic, I'm just stubborn. Emma touched his face. Your father wanted us to fail, so let's prove him wrong. They worked harder after that, like they had something to prove. Maybe they did. Summer brought better weather and harder work. They managed to expand the herd by 20 head through a trade with a rancher 2 territories over, fixed the irrigation system, planted crops that might actually survive. And slowly, against all odds, the ranch started to feel less like a burden and more like a home. Then Clara showed up. Emma was working in the garden when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up to see her sister dismounting, wearing a traveling dress that had seen better days. Clara looked different, thinner, older. The polish was gone, replaced by something harder. Emma, she said. Emma stood slowly, dirt falling from her hands. Clara, I heard you were in St. Louis. I was. Aunt Margaret's house, it was... Clara's voice faltered. Horrible. What happened? She treated me like a servant. Said since father had no money left, I'd have to work for my keep, cleaning, cooking, caring for her horrible children. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I left 2 days ago. I didn't know where else to go. Emma's first instinct was to turn her away, to remind Clara of all the times she'd been cruel, all the ways she'd benefited from Emma's invisibility. But looking at her sister now, broken and desperate and alone, Emma couldn't do it. Come inside, she said. Clara followed her into the small house, looking around at the simple furnishings with something like shock. This is where you live? Yes. It's so small. It's what we can afford. Emma poured water for washing. Are you hungry? Starving. Clara sat down heavily. Emma, I'm sorry for everything, for how father treated you, for not defending you, for being angry when Cole chose you instead of me. Emma studied her sister. The apology sounded genuine, but Clara had been trained her whole life to say what people wanted to hear. Why are you really here? Emma asked. Clara's composure cracked completely. Because I have nowhere else to go. Father's dead, Emma. He drank himself to death in a boarding house in Helena. I got the telegram 3 days ago. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Their father was dead. She waited for grief, for tears, for something. Instead, she felt empty. How do you feel? Clara asked, watching her face. I don't know, Emma said honestly. I thought I'd feel something, but I don't. Me neither. Clara wiped her eyes. Isn't that awful? Our father's dead, and I just feel relieved. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 daughters mourning the absence of grief. Cole came in from the barn and stopped short at seeing Clara. Emma? He said carefully. Clara needs a place to stay, Emma said, just for a few days, until she figures out what to do next. Cole looked at Emma, then at Clara, then back at Emma. If that's what you want. Clara stayed a few days, then a week, then a month. At first she was useless, didn't know how to cook without a kitchen full of supplies, couldn't do laundry without servants, had never worked a full day in her life. But slowly she learned. Emma taught her to cook simple meals. Cole showed her how to manage the household accounts. Mrs. Brennan, who visited occasionally with supplies, taught her basic sewing and mending. And Clara, who'd spent her whole life being ornamental, discovered she was actually good with numbers. "Your books are a mess," she told Cole one evening, spreading ledgers across the table. "You're spending more than you're making." "I know that," Cole said, defensive. "But you're spending on the wrong things. These fence posts you bought in town? You paid double what you should have. This feed? Same thing. And you're not tracking your breeding cycles properly, so you don't know which cattle are profitable and which are draining resources." Emma and Cole exchanged a look. "Can you fix it?" Emma asked. Clara looked up from the ledgers, and for the first time since arriving, she smiled. "Yes, I think I can." She took over the books completely. Within 2 months, she'd renegotiated their supply contracts, set up a proper tracking system, and found 3 ways they were hemorrhaging money without realizing it. The ranch's finances slowly started to stabilize. "I didn't know you were good at this," Emma said one night, watching Clara work by lamplight. "Neither did I. Father never let me near the accounts. Said it wasn't appropriate for a lady." Clara's smile was bitter. "Turns out the only thing I was trained to do, look decorative and marry well, was the one thing I'm actually terrible at. But this, numbers and systems and finding patterns, I'm good at this." "You are," Emma agreed. Clara set down her pen. "I'm grateful, that you let me stay, after everything. You're my sister. That didn't matter before. It matters now." Emma sat down across from her. "We're all we have left, Clara. Might as well figure out how to be family." Something passed between them then. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. They'd both been hurt by the same man in different ways. Both been raised to serve purposes that had nothing to do with who they actually were. And now they were both trying to build something different. It wasn't perfect. Clara still made cutting remarks when she was tired. Emma still struggled to trust her completely. But they were trying. That had to count for something. By October, the ranch was actually profitable. Barely, but enough to breathe. They had 60 head of cattle, enough food put away for winter, and money in the bank for the first time since Emma and Cole had started. They celebrated with a proper dinner, Clara's cooking, which had improved considerably. An actual wine Cole had bought in town. "To surviving," Emma said, raising her glass. "To surviving," Cole and Clara echoed. They drank, and Emma felt something unfamiliar in her chest. Not quite happiness, but maybe contentment, maybe the beginning of peace. Then winter came hard and fast, and a letter arrived from Mrs. Brennan that changed everything. Emma opened it at the kitchen table, Cole reading over her shoulder. Clara looked up from her ledgers, sensing something wrong. "What is it?" she asked. Emma's hands were shaking. "It's about Eleanor, Cole's mother." "What about her?" Cole's voice was tight. Emma read the letter out loud. Mrs. Brennan had been cleaning out old storage rooms at the main Bennett ranch and found a trunk belonging to Eleanor. Inside were letters, documents, evidence that Victor Bennett had been stealing, forging, and manipulating land deals for 20 years. Evidence that the Mercers were right. That dozens of families had been cheated. Evidence that Eleanor had known and documented everything before she died, hoping someone would someday have the courage to expose the truth. "She wanted you to have this," Emma read from Mrs. Brennan's letter. "Said if anything happened to her, these documents should go to you, but Victor locked them away. I only found them because he's been having chest pains and finally let me clean his study." Cole stood up so fast his chair fell over. "My mother knew. She knew what he was doing, and she documented it, and he—" His voice broke. "She died trying to fix fences in a storm. What if it wasn't an accident?" Emma's blood went cold. "Cole, you can't think. Why not? He stole our cattle to force me back under his control. Why wouldn't he kill his own wife to silence her?" "Because that's murder," Clara said quietly. "That's different than theft or manipulation." "Is it?" Cole paced the small kitchen like a caged wolf. "When you build an empire on stealing from people, when you destroy families and forge documents and ruin lives, where's the line?" Emma didn't have an answer. They sat up all night reading through the documents Mrs. Brennan had sent, letters in Eleanor's handwriting, forged deeds with Victor's signature, records of bribes paid and families displaced, 20 years of crimes meticulously documented by a woman who'd loved her husband enough to give him a chance to make it right, and who died before she could force him to choose. "What do we do with this?" Emma asked as dawn broke. Cole looked at the papers spread across their table. Evidence that could destroy his father. Evidence that could restore stolen property to dozens of families. Evidence that could tear apart everything the Bennett name represented. "We use it," he said finally. "We make it right." "Cole, if you expose this, your father will never forgive you," Clara said. "He hasn't forgiven me already. At least this way, some good comes from it." Emma reached for his hand. "Are you sure?" "No. But my mother died trying to fix this. I won't let her sacrifice mean nothing." They brought the documents to the territorial marshal in Helena, showed him everything, watched his face go pale as he read through Eleanor's meticulous records. "This is—" The marshal looked up. "This is enough to prosecute, to return stolen land, to potentially send Victor Bennett to prison." "I know," Cole said. "Are you certain you want to do this? He's your father. He's also a thief, and my mother died trying to stop him." Cole's voice was steady. "Make it right." The investigation took 3 months. During that time, Victor tried everything to silence them. Threatened lawsuits, offered money, sent intermediaries begging Cole to reconsider. Cole refused every time. The day the marshal arrested Victor Bennett, Emma and Cole stood on the ridge overlooking their small ranch and watched storm clouds gather over the mountains. "He'll hate you forever," Emma said. "I know. Was it worth it?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "My mother spent years trying to convince him to fix his mistakes, to choose integrity over empire. He chose wrong every time." He looked at Emma. If she'd lived, maybe she could have changed him, but she didn't, so someone else had to. They watched the storm roll in, and Emma thought about all the ways children try to fix their parents' mistakes. All the ways the past reaches forward to demand justice. All the ways choosing right over easy costs everything. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we see if we can actually build something that lasts." Cole turned to her. "Without my father's shadow. Without stolen land or forged documents or crimes buried in the foundation. Just us," Emma said. "Just us," Cole agreed. The storm broke overhead, rain pouring down in sheets. They ran for the house, laughing despite everything, soaked and freezing and terrified of what came next. But they ran together. And maybe that was enough. The fallout from Victor Bennett's arrest was worse than Emma expected and different than Cole feared. The territorial court moved slowly, grinding through evidence while Victor sat in a cell in Helena awaiting trial. His lawyers fought everything, but Eleanor's documentation was too thorough, too detailed, too damning. Meanwhile, the families he'd stolen from started coming forward. The Mercers were first. They arrived at the small ranch on a cold November morning, 3 generations of them, led by the older Mercer Emma had met months before. "We heard what you did," he said to Cole, "turning in your own father." Cole's jaw was tight. He deserved it. Maybe. Mercer studied him. But it took guts, more than most men have. Emma watched from the porch as Cole and Mercer shook hands. It wasn't friendship, but it was the beginning of something other than hatred. Other families followed. The Hendersons, who'd lost water rights. The Pratts, whose land had been seized through forged documents. The Yamamotos, who'd been run off their property entirely and told they had no legal recourse because they were immigrants. Each family brought stories of Victor's cruelty. Each one thanked Cole for doing what no one else had the courage to do. And each conversation left Cole looking more hollowed out. "You did the right thing," Emma told him one night, finding him staring at his mother's portrait, the one item they'd brought from the main ranch. "Then why does it feel so wrong?" "Because he's still your father, and hating someone you used to love is harder than hating a stranger." Cole turned to her, his eyes red. "I keep thinking about when I was a boy, before I understood what he was. He taught me to ride, showed me the ranch, told me stories about building the empire." His voice cracked. "I loved him, Emma, and I don't know how to reconcile that with what he actually is." Emma didn't have an answer. She'd spent years hating her own father, But at least Richard Calloway had never pretended to be anything other than what he was. A selfish man who used his daughters for his own benefit. Victor had been different. He'd built an empire and called it legacy. He'd destroyed families and called it business. He'd loved his son while poisoning everything around him. That kind of complexity didn't have easy answers. The trial began in February. Emma and Cole attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom while prosecutors laid out 2 decades of crimes. The courtroom filled with victims, families Victor had destroyed, people who'd lost everything to his greed. Victor sat at the defense table looking older than Emma had ever seen him. Smaller somehow, stripped of the power and fear that had always surrounded him like armor. He never looked at Cole. Not once. On the 3rd day of testimony, the prosecution called Cole to the stand. Emma watched her husband walk to the witness box, his back straight, his face carefully blank. The prosecutor was gentle but thorough. "Mr. Bennett, can you identify the handwriting in these documents?" "Yes, that's my mother's handwriting." "And did your mother ever discuss these matters with you?" "Not directly. But I remember arguments between my parents, about business practices, about integrity." Cole's voice was steady. "My mother believed in doing things honestly. My father believed in doing whatever was necessary." "And which philosophy did you choose to follow?" Cole finally looked at his father. "My mother's." Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went dark. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict came back guilty on 17 counts of fraud, forgery, theft, and corruption. The judge sentenced Victor Bennett to 8 years in prison and ordered the return of all stolen property to its rightful owners. In the hallway afterward, Emma and Cole stood together while families celebrated around them. Justice felt less like victory and more like grief. "He'll die in there," Cole said quietly. "He's too old to survive 8 years." "I know. I did this to him." "No." Emma turned Cole to face her. "He did this to himself. You just refused to keep covering for him." Cole's eyes were wet. "He was my father. And he was a thief." "Both things are true, Cole. You don't have to choose which one matters more." They went home to the ranch that night and didn't talk about the trial. Didn't process what had happened. Just worked until exhaustion made sleep possible. That became the pattern. Work until thinking was impossible. Sleep until dreams woke them. Start again. Clara watched them both spiral and finally snapped one evening in March. "This has to stop," she said, slamming her ledger closed. "What has to stop?" Cole asked tiredly. "This. You two destroying yourselves with guilt and work and refusing to actually deal with what happened." Clara stood up. "Victor Bennett was a criminal. He hurt people. He deserved what he got. And you two need to stop punishing yourselves for telling the truth." "You don't understand," Cole started. "I understand perfectly. You think if you just work hard enough, you can somehow make up for having a terrible father. You think if you suffer enough, it'll erase the guilt of putting him in prison." Clara's voice was sharp. "But it won't. The guilt will eat you alive whether you work yourself to death or not." "So what do you suggest?" Emma asked. "I suggest you let yourself be happy." Clara looked between them. "You have a ranch that's actually profitable now. You have each other. You exposed corruption and helped people get their lives back. Those are good things. Why can't you let them be good?" Emma and Cole stared at her. "When did you get so wise?" Emma asked. "When I stopped trying to be what other people wanted me to be." Clara picked up her ledger again. "Father wanted me to be beautiful and marriageable. I tried so hard to be perfect that I forgot to be real. You two are doing the opposite, trying so hard to suffer that you're forgetting to live." She left the room, and Emma and Cole sat in silence. "She's right," Emma said finally. "I know. So what do we do about it?" Cole looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. "I don't know, but maybe we start by admitting we deserve this. The ranch, each other, a life that isn't built on guilt." Emma reached for his hand. "Think we can do that?" "We can try." It wasn't a magic solution. They still had bad days. Cole still woke up from nightmares about his father. Emma still felt phantom guilt about leaving her family behind. But slowly, they started letting themselves be happy. They planted a garden in spring and actually enjoyed watching things grow instead of just seeing it as another chore. They threw a barn-raising party and invited neighboring families, including the Mercers. They bought 2 new horses and didn't feel guilty about the expense. Clara started courting the bookkeeper from town, a quiet man named James who appreciated her sharp mind more than her faded beauty. They married in June in a simple ceremony at the ranch. "I never thought I'd be happy married to a bookkeeper," Clara told Emma the night before the wedding. "I was raised to want wealth and status and everything Father promised me. And now? Now I just want someone who sees me, really sees me, not the performance or the potential or what I could do for them. Just me." Clara smiled. "Turns out that's worth more than all the wealth in Montana." Emma thought about that conversation often in the months that followed, about how all of them, Emma, Cole, Clara, had been raised to value the wrong things, to want power or security or approval instead of the harder, messier work of being real. In October, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole while they were mending fences because that's where they always were. He dropped his hammer and just stared at her. "You're sure?" "Yes." "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I wanted to be certain before I said anything." Cole pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face. "We're going to have a baby," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We're going to have a baby," Emma confirmed. That night they sat on the porch and talked about the future for the first time without fear, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about what they'd do differently than their own fathers had done. "I don't want our children to grow up thinking they have to earn love," Emma said. "I don't want them to feel invisible or worthless, or like they're only valuable when they're useful. I don't want them to inherit my father's empire or his legacy or anything built on other people's suffering," Cole added. "I want them to inherit this, something small and honest and ours. Even if it's hard, especially if it's hard." Cole took her hand. "Hard and honest is better than easy and corrupt." The pregnancy was difficult. Emma was sick for months. The doctor from town made regular visits and charged them more than they could afford. Clara took over most of Emma's work while Cole hovered anxiously. "I'm not dying," Emma told him in January, when she was 7 months along and huge and miserable. "Women have babies all the time." "My mother died," Cole said quietly. Emma hadn't thought about that, about Eleanor dying young, about Cole growing up watching his father become more bitter and cruel without her there to balance him. "I'm not your mother," Emma said gently. "And you're not your father. We're different people making different choices. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." The baby came in March, 3 weeks early, during a snowstorm that kept the doctor trapped in town. Mrs. Brennan arrived just in time, having somehow sensed she was needed. Clara boiled water and tore sheets while Cole paced outside the bedroom door. The labor lasted 14 hours. Emma thought she might die from the pain, but Mrs. Brennan's weathered hands were steady and sure. "One more push," she said. Emma pushed, and suddenly there was crying, high and angry and alive. "It's a girl," Mrs. Brennan announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. Cole burst through the door. "Emma, are you—" "I'm fine." Emma held out her arms for the baby. "We're both fine." The baby was tiny and red and perfect. She had Cole's dark hair and Emma's gray eyes and lungs that suggested she'd inherited both their stubbornness. "What should we name her?" Cole asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his daughter like she was a miracle. Emma thought about all the women who'd shaped her life. Her mother, who'd loved her but died too soon. Martha, who'd shown her kindness when no one else did. Mrs. Brennan, who'd helped bring this baby into the world. But there was one name that felt right. "Eleanor," Emma said, "after your mother. After the woman who documented the truth even when it cost her everything." Cole's eyes filled with tears. "Eleanor." They called her Ellie. She was colicky and demanding and kept them awake for months. But watching Cole with his daughter, gentle and patient and completely devoted, made Emma's chest ache with something that felt like hope. This was what breaking cycles looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. When Ellie was 6 months old, they received word that Victor Bennett had died in prison. Heart failure, the letter said. Quick and relatively painless. Cole didn't cry at the funeral, just stood in the cemetery while a handful of people, mostly business associates and distant relatives, paid their respects to a man who'd built an empire on lies. Emma held Ellie while the preacher spoke empty words about legacy and loss. Clara and James stood beside them, a united front against the judgment in some people's eyes. Afterward, they went back to the ranch. Cole didn't talk about his father's death, just threw himself into work with renewed intensity. Emma let him work for a few days, then cornered him in the barn one evening. "You're allowed to grieve him," she said. "I don't know what I'm grieving." Cole's voice was raw. The father I thought I had? The man he actually was? The relationship we might have had if he'd chosen differently? All of it, probably. Cole leaned against the stable wall, looking exhausted. "He died hating me." "You don't know that." "He never wrote, never asked to see me, never acknowledged Ellie's existence." Cole's hands clenched into fists. "He chose pride over his own family, and now he's gone, and I'll never know if he regretted it." Emma moved closer. "Maybe he did regret it. Maybe he didn't, but you made the choice you could live with. That has to be enough." "Is it enough for you, with your father?" Emma thought about Richard Calloway, dead in a boarding house, alone and bitter until the end. About the relationship they'd never had and never would. "No," she admitted, "it's not enough. But it's all I have. And I've learned that sometimes the best you can do is accept that some wounds don't heal. They just become part of who you are." They stood together in the dimness of the barn, two people carrying the weight of imperfect fathers and complicated grief. "I don't want Ellie to carry this," Cole said finally. "I don't want her to inherit our damage." "She won't. She'll have her own damage to deal with." Emma smiled sadly. "That's what being human means. We all get broken in different ways. The best we can do is try not to break our children in the same ways we were broken." Cole pulled her close, and they held each other while the sun set through the barn slats, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. 5 years passed, then 10. The ranch grew slowly, carefully, honestly. They never became rich, but they became stable. They hired workers and paid them fair wages. They traded with neighbors instead of stealing from them. They built partnerships instead of empires. The Mercers became allies, then friends. The water rights dispute was settled fairly once the forged documents were invalidated. Other families Victor had hurt rebuilt their lives, and some even prospered. Clara and James had 3 children. Clara ran the books for 5 ranches across the territory and became known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. She never became beautiful again, but she became respected. That turned out to be worth more. Ellie grew into a fierce, stubborn child who asked too many questions and refused to stay clean for more than 5 minutes. She helped with ranch work alongside Emma and Cole, not because she was invisible or unwanted, but because she wanted to. Because she loved the land and the animals and the honest work of building something real. One evening, when Ellie was 8, she came running into the house with grass stains on her dress and triumph on her face. "Mama, Papa, I fixed the fence in the east pasture." "All by yourself?" Cole asked, impressed. "Well, Tommy Mercer helped, but I did most of it." Ellie bounced on her toes. "And I checked the cattle like you taught me. They're all healthy, and I found 3 places the irrigation needs work." Emma exchanged a look with Cole. Their daughter was exactly what they'd hoped she'd be. Capable and confident and completely herself. "That's good work," Emma said. "But next time, don't try to fix things alone. Even when you know what you're doing, it's safer to have help." "But you always work alone." "Because I'm stubborn and old and set in my ways." Emma smiled. "You can be smarter than I was." Ellie nodded seriously, then ran off to wash up for dinner. "She's just like you," Cole said, watching her go. "She's like both of us. Stubborn like me. Idealistic like you." Emma moved to the window, looking out at the ranch they'd built. "But she's also completely herself, and that's exactly what we wanted." That night, after Ellie was asleep, Emma and Cole sat on the porch, as they often did. The Montana sky was full of stars, the air cool and clean. Clara and James's laughter drifted from the guest house where they were visiting for the week. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Choosing this life over something easier?" Emma thought about it. About the years of hard work and uncertainty. About the blisters and exhaustion and fear. About the complicated grief of imperfect fathers and damaged families. But she also thought about Ellie's laugh. About Clara finding her purpose. About neighbors who'd become friends. About work that actually mattered instead of just maintaining appearances. No, she said finally. It was hard. Sometimes it's still hard. But it's ours. We built this honestly. And I think that matters more than whether it was easy. Even when it almost destroyed us? Especially then. Emma took his hand. Easy things don't teach you anything. Hard things show you what you're actually made of. And we're made of tougher stuff than either of us knew. Cole smiled in the darkness. When did you get so wise? When I stopped trying to be what other people wanted me to be. Emma squeezed his hand. Same as Clara, same as you. We all had to learn that the hard way. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Emma thought about the woman she'd been at 26, invisible, worthless, convinced she'd never be chosen or wanted or enough. That woman felt like a stranger now. She'd learned hard truths in the years since leaving her father's ranch. She'd learned that being chosen didn't fix everything, that love was work and compromise and choosing each other even when it was hard, that family was complicated and messy, and sometimes the people who were supposed to love you couldn't. But she'd also learned that she was stronger than she thought, that she could build something from nothing, that her rough hands and honest work and stubborn heart were valuable in ways her father never understood. Most importantly, she'd learned that choosing herself wasn't selfish. It was survival. The door creaked open, and Ellie padded out in her nightgown, rubbing her eyes. Can't sleep? Emma asked. I had a dream. Ellie climbed into Emma's lap, still small enough for that. About Grandfather Victor, the one I never met. Emma and Cole exchanged a glance. They'd been honest with Ellie about Victor, but carefully so. She knew her grandfather had made bad choices, that he'd hurt people, that Cole had done the right thing by exposing the truth. What about him? Cole asked carefully. Was he really that bad? Or was he just broken? The question was more complicated than an 8-year-old should be asking, but Ellie had always been wise beyond her years. Both probably, Emma said honestly. People aren't all good or all bad. Sometimes they're broken in ways that make them do terrible things, but being broken doesn't excuse the harm they cause. Do you think he loved Papa? Cole's jaw tightened, but he answered, I think he loved me in the only way he knew how, but his love was twisted up with control and pride and fear, so it ended up hurting more than helping. That's sad, Ellie said. Yes, Cole agreed. It is. I won't be like that, Ellie announced with all the certainty of childhood. When I'm grown up, I'll love people right, not twisted up. Emma smiled and kissed her daughter's head. That's a good goal, though it's harder than it sounds. I know, but you and Papa did it, so I can too. After Ellie went back to bed, Cole turned to Emma. Is that what we did? Loved each other right? Emma considered. Their relationship hadn't been perfect. They'd fought and struggled and hurt each other in small ways over the years. There'd been times she'd wondered if they'd made the right choice. Times Cole had withdrawn into himself and shut her out. Times she'd been too stubborn and he'd been too proud, and they'd both been too damaged to know how to fix it. But they'd never stopped trying, never stopped choosing each other, never let the damage define them. I think we loved each other honestly, Emma said, which is better than right, because honest includes the messy parts and the broken parts and all the ways we're still figuring it out. Cole pulled her close, and they sat together as the night deepened around them. Years later, when Ellie was grown with children of her own, she'd ask Emma the same question everyone asks their parents eventually. How did you do it? How did you and Papa build something good out of so much damage? And Emma, older now, her hair gray and her hands even more scarred from decades of work, would think carefully before answering. We stopped trying to be perfect, she'd say. We stopped waiting for approval from people who'd never give it. We stopped carrying guilt that wasn't ours to carry. And we chose each other every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. That's it? That's it. That's all anyone can do. Choose who you want to be. Choose who you want to love. Choose the life you want to build. And then work like hell to make those choices mean something. But that conversation was years away. For now, Emma and Cole sat on their porch, watching the stars, while their daughter slept safely inside the house they'd built with their own hands. The ranch wasn't perfect. The work was never done. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs. Built on truth instead of lies. On work instead of theft. on choosing each other instead of accepting what others had chosen for them. And in the end, that made all the difference. Emma had started her life as the forgotten daughter, the invisible one, the girl nobody wanted. She'd ended it as a woman who'd rebuilt an empire by refusing to let corruption stand, who'd chosen love over certainty, who'd raised a daughter to be fierce and honest and completely herself, not because it was easy, not because anyone expected it, not because she was perfect, but because she'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. She'd learned to choose herself, to believe she deserved better, to fight for a life built on truth instead of accepting the lies she'd been told about her worth. And that choice, that single, brave, terrifying choice to leave her father's ranch and ride into the unknown, had changed everything. Not just for her, but for everyone she touched. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging. The Montana wind whispered through the grass, and Emma Calloway Bennett sat with her husband and felt something she'd never felt as a girl. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, not the end of hard work or uncertainty or fear, but the deep, bone-deep knowledge that she'd chosen right, that she'd built something worth having, that she'd become someone worth being. And sometimes that was all the victory anyone needed.